Well, good day. It is the third day of May 2021. And again, what I'm going to be doing is just a continuation of what I started doing last week, which is looking at law enforcement agencies, federal law enforcement agencies, as rated by their employees. And as you probably saw last week, or maybe you didn't see it, but the marshals and the DEA rated, relatively highly for law enforcement. Now, are they high in pertaining to the government altogether? They're in the top third. But insofar as law enforcement agencies, they're rated pretty high by their employees. And the data from these surveys comes from a survey that's put out by the Office of Personnel Management, which is the personnel management arm of the executive branch of the federal government. And it's done annually, and it's called the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. And there are a large number of questions that an employee fills out. Number one, they rate how many people turn back the survey. That in and of itself is an indicator, but also of the surveys that are turned back. There are really, with regards to what they refer to as an engagement score, there's a few factors that they look at. Overall, they recommend their place of employment as a place to work. There's three questions that I'm going to put up on the screen. And this is what they refer to as the engagement score, the overall engagement score. And this is used to rank the participating agencies from 1 down to 420. And today we're going to look at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which one would think has a very high rating. As a matter of fact, everybody that I know that's outside of law enforcement, certainly has a favorable view of the FBI as opposed to, ATF. There's certain agencies people love to hate, but the FBI really is not one of them. But so it's surprising to me that they rank where they do. It's surprising to me that they've fallen as quickly as they have. And so let's take a look at the FBI rating, and let's try to go a little bit deeper and do some analysis on it. Okay, and this is the FBI score as of 2019. 2020 data is changed somewhat because of the COVID pandemic. A lot of federal employees, especially those who work in D.C., have been working from home, so they've come up with a new way of measuring this, and it kind of has thrown the whole thing off. So I think 2019 is really, and the years prior to that, are really the best in determining employee morale. And their overall engagement score for the Federal Bureau of Investigation is 242 out of 420. Now again, what is engagement score? It's 3 questions on a very long survey. Number one, I recommend my organization is a good place to work. And if you think it is, you put down, there's a little graph. 10 would be high, 1 or 0 would be none, Number two, considering everything, how satisfied are you with your job? Again, the same thing. And then how satisfied are you with your organization? And again, looking at this, it's about average, a little bit below average, actually. And one thing we can see is that it has consistently gone down from 2007, when it had a fairly high score. It was in the upper quartile, down to where it is in 2000, or was in 2019. It's been really a continual decline. And if we look at the graph, this is the median of average. And again, the Bureau was fairly strong above average in 2007. And then you can see there's been peaks and valleys, but it has gone down. So this is very interesting. And if you ask why, and you look on the internet as to why, you get all sorts of theories, a lot of them colored by political opinion. But let's look a little bit deeper at scores by category. And as you can see here, this rates a number of other factors that go into it as well. And what you're going to see here is also, generally speaking, a decline in all areas from 2007 to 2019. And one thing that you will notice, effective leadership was, there's been peaks and valleys, but it kind of reached really a low point in 2019. It's rated 322 out of 413, not high at all. Okay, with regards to empowerment of employees, also low. Senior leadership, not very high at all. It did have a rise in senior leadership, then a drop after the firing or removal of James Comey, but it wasn't very high before that. And again, if you look at the Washington Post articles or something like that, listen, well, it had to do with Donald Trump. That's all it is. Everything in the government is Donald Trump's fault. No, not really. Because you have to look back, prior to, okay, yes, it did go up with James Comey, but under Robert Mueller, it dropped significantly. It was way down there to begin with. And what we could say is senior leadership went up a little bit with the appointment of James Comey, and then with his removal, it went back down again. But it had been in the basement when Robert Mueller was running the agency. Okay, one area that the agents tended to rate fairly high throughout the entire history, but again has gone down, is employee skills mission match. That goes from a high of about 82% in 2007. But, again, it's decreasing. Dissatisfaction with pay. So with regards to other things like work life and performance-based awards, these things have not been good. So why is this? And that is a good question. And to look at it, I looked at another document, and that is the FBI Climate Survey. Which they put out, their own agency puts out, with regards to, they poll employees at headquarters, and they also poll employees in the field. So let's take a look at that. And if we take a look at the employee climate surveys, I'm going to put these up. These are done internal to the FBI headquarters, and FBI in the field. And one thing that you're going to find is that the agents and employees are proud to work for the FBI, but they're not completely happy about the details of their work. And again, if you look at a press report, and I looked at a number of them to try to figure out why the morale issue is what it is. The press, wants you to hear, sometimes they want you to interpret it the way they interpret it, through a partisan political lens, and the whole thing will be Trump, Trump, and more Trump. Everything went bad after he fired James Comey, but that's not the case. If you look at these data, you can see that morale in a lot of aspects was in the tank long before Donald Trump, announced he was going to be president. This was under the leadership of, before James Comey became director, this is under the leadership of one Robert Mueller, who was director from 2001 until James Comey came in around 2014, 2015. Now, certainly with Director Comey, the morale did go up and then it dropped after he was fired. That is undeniable. But it was low prior to that. It was significantly low prior to that. So there was pride in being a member of that agency, but a lot of the details of that agency people aren't happy with. Now, why is that? And again, the answer I've got is best, answered by a number of Harvard researchers who did a report. And I'll put the link on there. How the FBI reinvented itself after 9/11. Okay, from about 1974 to 2001, the FBI again went from national security, which had been a huge thing under Mr. Hoover. If you look at the 40s, 50s, I'm going to do an unauthorized history of the FBI later on. But a lot of what they were doing was domestic spying, red hunting, going after a lot of their agents were not doing criminal work. They were doing domestic intelligence collection. Well, after Mr. Hoover's death and the resignation of President Nixon, a lot of that changed. Very important laws were put in effect, the Privacy Act, Freedom of Information Act. The Bureau went back to doing criminal work, and they did bang-up criminal work, world-class criminal work. Cook County's judicial system, which was rotten, Cook County of Chicago, they cleaned it out. They got the corrupt judges and the wiretaps on the judges, and Operation Greylord, world-class case. Cases that they did into corruption in the Chicago Police Department, world-class. Takedown of John Gotti and other people who were untouchable, world-class. But then came 9/11. With 9/11, they shifted from being a law enforcement agency. Now, yes, they are law enforcement, but they're primarily national security. Most of their work is national security involved. And based on the revelations, of course, I don't release anything that I obtained through my employment, but based on the revelation of a NSA contractor who defected to Russia, everybody knows who he is. The big tech companies collaborate with NSA after 9/11 to do what? To keep us safe by providing all of our details, everything really to the United States government, which then filters it through. And in some cases, undoubtedly, this has led to a stop in major, there have been probably major terrorist schemes thwarted. But on the other hand, power, power is something to be very, very carefully given out. And power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think, really since, probably 2015 onward, the old trends that were evident in the 1950s and 1960s with the FBI are beginning to reemerge. And during that period of time, the FBI was engaged in a great deal of domestic surveillance, and I think they are engaged in a great deal of domestic surveillance right now. In the 50s and 60s, a lot of the domestic surveillance, some of it was undoubtedly necessary, some of it was politically motivated, and some of it just benefited the career of Mr. Hoover. And I think the domestic surveillance that's been going on since 9/11, undoubtedly some of it has been very helpful to our country. Some of it is probably politically motivated. You're seeing agents being used for political rather than law enforcement uses. So hopefully this has been useful. I'm going to do one on an unauthorized history of the FBI, but I'm going to do the other agencies with regards to these surveys with some commentary as to why I think they're as low as they are in some cases, or as high as they are. Okay, so have a good day.